The good folks at Comics for Fun and Profit have been doing 2 episodes a week for quite some time now, and it's all thanks to, first of all, Jason, and second of all, our patrons who allow us to add the space on our server, broadcast more, store more, share more with you, the listeners. I'm envious of those of you who have unlimited storage and media server capabilities. We pay for ours here at the C4 FAP. It ain't cheap. We thank you so much for those of you who go to patreon.com/comicsfunprofit and contribute at any level to say thanks, to say, I want to be a part of your Slack channel conversations. I want to get exclusives. I want to get early access. I want to get ad-free access. I want to get swag. I want to get some free stuff. Whatever your reasoning is, we appreciate it at any level because it does make a difference. So from the bottom of Kyle and I and Jason's heart, thank you for contributing.
Aloha, this is Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I will be interviewing Ryan Silbert and Luke Lieberman. They are the writers for Stan Lee's Alliance Orphans. Now, this is a science fiction action-adventure original hardcover graphic novel from Dynamite. Now, this 184-page graphic novel is out in stores right now. Ryan and Luke, welcome to the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. How are you guys doing today?
Awesome.
Thank you for having us on this. I'm a big listener, so this is a real treat for me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time today, guys. Now I'm gonna just, for listeners, I'm just gonna give just some little bit history of Luke and Ryan's previous works, basically. And Luke and Ryan, please feel free to correct me at any time. And if you guys want to add anything that you want listeners to really check out, please feel free to do that. So now Luke is a writer. He's also the licensor and executive editor of the Red Sonja comic book franchise. Now, I got this information from the Goodreads website. And also, too, Luke, now help me out on this. I'm going to say that you have a hand in the actually now in production Red Sonja movie.
I'm a producer on the film, and I'm actually coming to you from location in Bulgaria.
Yes, that is incredible. And this is off the cuff. Luke, I'm going to tell listeners right now. Luke, right now, the time zone right now is he's in Bulgaria right now. It's 10 o'clock at night. And you guys are doing a night shoot right now. Wow, that's amazing. And it's got to be.
It's yesterday was brutally cold. Today is actually not as bad, but this is the last day of night shoots. Tomorrow's a turnaround day. Actually, tomorrow everybody pretty much has off.
Oh, okay. So,
yeah.
All right. But I'm sorry, off the cuff. What? When are we looking for the movie to be released?
Oh, I'm not. I mean, I if I had to guess, because we don't have a release date right now, it's either gonna be late 2023 or first quarter 2024.
Oh, okay. All right.
That sounds about right.
I can't wait for it to check out. So now also Ryan is a writer. He has written the audiobook The Codis Case with the James Patterson Entertainment. And Ryan, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I got this information from the Amazon website. You haven't hand in the upcoming Stephen King movie, The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
We're still in development, so no night shoots for us. But I'm learning all I can about night shoots from Luke right now.
Okay. All right. Now, Ryan and Luke, did I miss anything?
No, I think I mean, we're excited about we're excited that that Orphans is finally out. I mean, this was we put a lot of work into it, so it's great. I mean, I actually have a copy in my backpack, and holding it in my hands means a lot.
Yes. So okay. Ryan, did I miss anything? Did you want to add anything?
No, like Luke said, like I think what's wonderful about the way like this collaboration has kind of emerged
Mm-hmm.
and our kind of work with Dynamite and actually kind of our work with all of our partners in various ways is uh we're really super patient and in our creative endeavors, and we love making and releasing the product as much as we love creating it.
Yes.
And this is, the Orphans started, over a decade ago for Luke
Mm-hmm.
in terms of its development in this point. So like it's just so much fun to be here talking to you about it and actually working and speaking to fans and getting to hear reactions. It's like this is the best. This is why we do what we do.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Now, before we start getting really into the interview, I want to give a big shout out to Mia Jacobs and Liz. I'm going to try to pronounce her name, Bybar, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing the public relations company correctly. I believe it's Lead Company. So basically, Mia and Liz, just thank you very much for setting up this interview and providing me with an advanced review copy. So again, Mia and Liz, thank you very much. I'm just going to add, do you guys want to add anything to that?
Oh, me and Liz are the best. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, we would not be here, like you just said, without them. Literally, we would not be on the show. But yeah, listen, reaching out to the fans and finding engagement, like that's like again the biggest. Like I said it before, it's like the thing that's the most fun. So we love this stuff, and
yeah, it's
finding
also,
amazing partners who love our project is like special. Sorry, Luke, you were saying.
well, no, we wouldn't really be faithful to Stan's legacy if we weren't engaging with the fans. I mean, he kind of
100.
he kind of reinvented that whole idea back in the 60s and even before that. I mean, he sort of hand sold the comic book industry to the public, and that's part of how this industry was created and the way it is now.
And it's a key component for us as creators, because we are, this is an emerging story alliances, the universe. And for us, we're listening to fans constantly. So in order to be creative, it's nice to be in our little hidey hole when we're writing and creating, but it's also like very informative to find out what's working and what's not, and what people are really enjoying and being able to, respond to that creatively. So, PR and fan relationships are key to the entire process. Probably the most important thing.
Okay. Now, I also want to let our listeners know that I did get some of the information, and as you mentioned, the interaction with fans, because some of the information I got from was the comic book the Comic Book Club podcast that both of you guys been on a couple times already, which is great. I've seen actually the episode that you guys were on actually earlier this month, on October 4th episode. That was pretty good that you guys were on. Yeah. It looks like fun. You guys are having fun with that.
Those guys are always a lot of fun. And Ryan, I think that's the one where you like reconnected to someone from like the Prodigy days. Do we have that right?
Yeah, I'm so twisted inside of that whole group. Like Alex and I went to high school together, but his brother and I actually knew each other, and he got me through AP Bio. I wasn't a very good biology student because I was too busy reading my comics. But yeah, we reconnected with somebody on there, and he was like from the Prodigy community of comic collectors.
Nice.
Like, it's comic. What's cool about the comic community is like it's like everlasting, and you can like dip in and out, like you're such a big part of it, Jason, too, now, like with your listeners. It's like there's just a huge, like, it's like such an interesting continuum. And you're picking up the baton almost like a long marathon of like, I love this thing, now you're gonna like this thing, or maybe you're not gonna like this thing. So being a part of that with Comic Book Live and you and stuff like that, like it's so much fun. It's so much fun. We were just talking about the champions, right? Like, it's like, where else do you get to talk about that?
And we're not talking about the recent champions. We're talking about the 1970s champions comic book of a team. For listeners, because me, Luke, and Ryan were talking a little bit before we started the interview, we're talking about the champions from the 1970s, the one where it was Hercules, Black Widow, Angel, Iceman, and then I think later on Dark Star. But it was just a very interesting series. So, all right, I'm sorry. I'm going to continue on. One more thing, one more place I got my information from was also the Comics Beat. That article was dated on July 21st of this year, and it was written by Diana DiCitio. Hopefully I got her name correctly. But so if you guys get a chance, please check out, Luke and Ryan's previous interviews through the Comic Book Club podcast and the Comics Beat as well. So I'm going to start off with you, Luke, and then Ryan. Where can listeners follow you on social media?
I mean, well, we actually have an Alliance Instagram. What is it? Alliance's Universe Instagram that we started pretty recently. And then I'm Red Sonja Official is our Red Sonja Instagram page, and that thing's been going on for quite a while. My wife runs it.
Oh, okay. And then Ryan?
Yeah, like we said, Alliances Universe to find out all things alliances, and then my handle is my name, so Ryan Silbert, and Luke similarly, different handles for different things, but he also has his own personal handle. Every now and then you can find it Luke_Lieberman.
Okay.
And sometimes it's Lieberman_Luke. Depends on how which service you're using.
All right. So Luke, I'm going to start off with this question. What do you remember? What was your first comic that you read, or comic book series that you remember? Could be Sunday Comics, Man Magazine.
Yeah, my first. I don't remember exactly what the first one I read was. The first one I remember making a real impression on me was Man Loves, God Kills, the X-Men series.
Oh yes.
In part because it, I think part of the reason that hit me was because it takes place in Westport, which is where I grew up. It took place in Connecticut, where I grew up. So it hit kind of close to home. But that one hit on a lot of themes that I was definitely feeling at the time. But I read, when I was growing up, there was a lot of X-Men. There was some Spider-Man. I was a big fan of Daredevil too, Doctor Strange, and I was definitely a Marvel kid. DC was a little more kind of foreign to me. I read widely in the Marvel realm, and also stuff like Calvin and Hobbes. Outside of comic books, stuff like that, I was pretty engrossed into.
Yeah. And then what about you, Ryan?
Yeah, like Luke, it's hard to remember your first, because both of us were kind of really fortunate. Luke's father was in the industry, so he would get boxes of comics at a time. And similarly, my uncle owned a comic book store in California. So he would, and I lived on the East Coast, so I would get shipped the comic books, and then I lived above a comic store. It was like the best kind of experience in New York City. So they were kind of, I just kind of lived inside of a fantasy land. But the one that Luke, in terms of an impression, the two that made impressions, I was an X-Men guy growing up, because it was the early 80s. But the ones that made impressions is at Forbidden Planet. I remember specifically there was the hunger crisis was going on in the 80s, and there was a DC book that was basically about the hunger crisis in the African continent. And I forget exactly what it was about, but I was like, wow, comics can really have influence. That's one of the first things I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. This is a heavy topic. And I was, young, very, very young.
Yes.
But the other one that I really remember is, I was telling Bill Sinkovich this, and this is why it's very strange to be working with him now, is the cover of Batman 400, which was the first comic that I thought was a piece of art because it was painted. And I misunderstood that as a kid, and I left it behind on a vacation, and I had to drive. I made my parents drive back an hour and a half to go get it. So I left it back in a rental house in an attic. So I still have that book over there.
I didn't buy you a new copy. Go back.
It wasn't so easy. It wasn't so easy in 1980, 80, whatever it was, 84. it was like the Oregon Trail. It was, no gas cars, horse pulled carriages.
Oh my God. You
I don't
guys
know.
are
Westport, you had a whole different world going on. It was maybe there, the woods.
oh my God, you guys, this is so incredible talking to you guys. I mean, Luke, I mean, like you said, you had a relative in the industry, you're getting boxes. Ryan, you had an uncle who had a comic shop in California, sent you stuff, and you lived over a comic book store. I mean, holy cow, that is so awesome. you know, I
Yeah.
I just find it very cool. So um
Yeah, well, the problem with something like that is you're constantly thinking, one day I'm going to open a comic book store, which
mhm.
is a big lift when you're saying that to your wife. I don't know, Luca. So basically, the only person I could talk to about this in the safe space is you, Jason, and Luke. Like,
Yeah.
I think I bring it up with Luke like once a month. Like, should we open a comic store?
Oh my God. Oh, okay. Sorry,
So,
I
are
got
you guys
distracted.
ready to do it? Luke, do you want to
Yeah,
open
yeah.
up one?
Oh, sure, man. Just find it, location, location, location. We just need to find the right spot.
Yeah,
All
possible.
right. So, let's see, Luke. I'm going to start off with you. How did your journey get started working in comics?
Um, well, like I said, I kind of grew up inside the industry a bit. And when I was in film school at NYU, and
Yes.
I met Stan when he came out for the X-Men premiere. He was in New York, which is to this day the coolest premiere I've ever been to, because it was at Ellis Island.
Oh,
And
yes.
because the end of the film takes place there, so the premiere was there. They like constructed a screen
Hmm.
um, to project in the museum, and then they had the after party on the grounds around it.
Hmm.
Um, and Anyway, he was in town. I interviewed him for my documentary I was making about him. So he sat down for an hour and just talked to me,
Oh my.
and kind of bombard him with questions. And then he offered me a job in Los Angeles when I graduated college. So I moved out to LA to work for him.
Hmm.
And then I had an opportunity to relaunch the Red Sonja comic in 2005.
Hmm.
After a couple of years of working for Stan, I relaunched Red Sonja in publishing, and sort of ever since. Now, I wrote an original graphic novel called Street Magic when I was very young, based on something I created while I was in college. But my first real professional writing gig, I had the opportunity to write a Red Sonja Thulsa Doom miniseries with Peter David. So Peter was the one that kind of taught me how to actually write a comic.
Yes.
Literally just how to lay out the panels and dialogue, and just the sort of nuts and bolts of how comic books are written.
Wow. That part I didn't know about you working with Peter. Like Peter David. Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah, well, he was so seasoned, and
Yes.
he was very like generous with his time and his knowledge. And
Hmm.
at that point, Stan wasn't really writing individual comic books anymore, so he wasn't really going to show me the ropes on that. But Peter took the time, and we co-wrote that series together. I don't even remember when that was. I
Oh
remember
yeah.
2006 or something like that. I mean, it was a long time ago.
Yeah. But also too, it's not only is Peter a seasoned comic book writer, but he's written a number of novels. I mean, Star Trek novels. Um, he wrote an incredible Hulk novel back, I want to say in the 90s. I still have my copy up on my shelf. My God.
Oh, wow.
He was also sort of a historian in the industry, and I
Yes.
mean, yeah, he's someone that I mean, we got off topic. It wasn't all strictly down to business on the writing. We definitely talked about a lot of things. But what he really sort of, in the particular sort of mentorship Peter had in my career, was sort of literally showing me how you pace out the story of a comic,
Mhm.
and just kind of showing me the ropes. I mean, it was
Yeah.
so old hat for him at that point. He'd been doing it, he could do it blindfolded in his sleep on his head.
Hmm.
I was the young one still, just trying to figure out how it works.
Hmm. And then Ryan, what about you? How did you get started working in comics?
This is it.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, this is for me, this is that moment.
Mhm.
You know, it was an interesting kind of route here, because when we started developing alliances with Stan, we had no predetermined medium to release it in. We were just developing characters, and like, I mean, this was an extraordinarily once in a lifetime opportunity to be doing like basically world building with Stan and Luke in a room, and sometimes virtually, to just create characters and like think about them in a Dungeons and Dragons sense, and think about storylines, and you think about big ideas. And we built out a pretty, you know, substantial library of material. And it released first, and you'd think, you know, as a comic fan my whole life, and then working with Stan and Luke, you think that, you know, here we are, we're going to go make a comic. And instead, what we did is we released an audio drama with Audible as an Audible original, and you know, also a passion of mine is audio storytelling. So that worked out for me. But we're coming back around to it, you know, after having released that in 2019 to do this graphic novel. So it's for me, this is the dream. It's incredible. So I'm just, you know, grateful for, you know, Luke for inviting me on this ride with him and Stan.
Ryan, I'm going to start off with you with this question. How excited were you to see your name on this book?
I was just surprised that somebody spelt it correctly, because I've been going to coffee shops for like 20 years where nobody gets it correctly. I'm like Silbert, like Dilbert, but with an S. And the Dilbert is no longer a comic strip, so nobody knows what I'm talking about. I say that. So you know, it's so exciting. I mean, it is beyond, and to share it with, like, you know, people I respect, that includes you, Luke, is what makes it super special. It's like I get to share it with people who I really love, and that's something that is, you know, you don't always get that when you're when you're sharing credits on a comic book or a movie.
Luke, I'm going to ask you, because like you said, you wrote, you know, a Red Sonja comic book back in the mid 2000s. How excited were you to see your name on a comic book?
Oh, I mean, you kind of grow up. I mean, we were having this conversation, Ryan and I, because we did at New York Comic Con when Orphans came out, when Alliance's Orphans came out, we did a signing with Bill. And it is, you know, you spend your whole life going to the shops, going to the conventions, and then suddenly finding yourself on the other side of the table. But I mean, it is kind of a dream come true. I don't know how else to put it. And yeah, I never took any part of that for granted. I always like I keep a collection of them. I have like a bookshelf where I keep every book or, you know, whatnot I've ever sort of touched. Although I will say it was also unique when we started doing alliances to see my name with Stan's. That meant a lot, you know. I mean, obviously seeing my name with Peter Davids was a big deal, but seeing my name with Stan was that felt like a full circle kind of moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna, let's see. I am going to, Luke, I'm gonna start off. Actually, I'm gonna start off with a quote from the I believe I want to say, I remember if I got it from the review copy. I want to say it probably is, but there's a quote from Stan Lee regarding alliances. Is quote, "What is more real, a world we are born into or the one we create ourselves?" And again, that's a quote from Stan Lee. I'm going to start off with this question. You know, I'm going to ask you, Luke, then Ryan, you can jump in. What is, and because you guys already talked about the world building, the character development, but for our listeners, what is the Alliance universe? What is it? Because we know it's an audiobooks. It came out in audiobooks. Now it's a graphic novel.
I mean, that was kind of the Stan always has these kind of a lot of his creative process starts out with asking a question. And that was, you know, one of the things here that was, you know, that question that you just quoted was sort of one, it's kind of the nature nurture, you know, do we create our environment or does our environment create us? It's also sort of how do the things that we create affect the world that we live in. That's kind of the facet of that question that's more relevant to Orphans, the book that we're talking about, because in that one we have the inventor, which was, you know, the prologue that we did with Bill Sienkiewicz, which is the opening chapter basically of Orphans, was basically the first bit of creating that we did with Stan. That was the kernel from which everything else sort of expanded, was the idea of this inventor. His people are wiped out. He's been enslaved, and he's this genius that his slave master is forced to create weapons for them, and then he create, you know, his best one he turns against them.
Yes.
But the inventor is, you know, a bit of a reckless character. You know, he's so sort of blinded by the light of creation that he doesn't really consider all the unintended consequences, or he doesn't really think through how these things might be used and abused. You know, he just makes things. He just sort of creates things. He's not necessarily very responsible about what happens with those things. And, you know, Orphans, he sort of leaves them to pick up the pieces after he destroys his slave masters and leaves the galaxy with this power vacuum, where, you know, he's created all these things that can either be tools or weapons, and whoever controls them will control the balance of power in this in the galaxy. Is, you know, there's sort of this scavenger hunts competition to try to sort of collect them in order to get the upper hand. And I think the Orphans kind of, some of them maybe idealize the inventor and sort of lionize him, but you know, there's also this sort of undercurrent of, you know, it was sort of like you sort of thrust this responsibility on us. Like, we now have to spend our lives chasing all this stuff down and make sure it doesn't, you know, destroy the galaxy or kill people.
Yes, yeah.
Because you just sort of left it to us. And that it's, you know, I think that has a lot of kind of real world sort of relevance. You know, there's people who, you know, you make the bomb, but you don't, you know, you think you make, you know, you figure out nuclear power, but you don't really think about what that's going to mean for the world. And in particular with this story, because it all kind of, if you go back to Trick of Light, which was the first thing that the first project that came out in this universe in 2019, that was more about the internet and sort of that kind of information technology, and how there was this idealism when it was created, and this idea that it was going to connect the world and help us to understand each other and break down all these barriers. And instead, it's been used as a sort of weaponized as a different information tool, and used to divide us and tribalize us and put us against each other. You know, it's a bit of a roundabout answer, but Ryan, you can jump in.
No, that's it. I mean, alliances just generally with that question is about not looking up at the stars anymore, but what happens when we start looking inside of ourselves? And just generally, you can see that kind of in the through line of almost every character that is in all of the different projects. It's not like Reed Richards looking at the stars. You're looking at the internet in the palm of your hand. You're curious about how to biohack yourself if you're on this earth in our real world. You're not dealing with gamma rays as much as you're dealing with like, how can I modify myself or be the best version of myself? You see this constantly in our version of the world, right? The real world. And very similar to the way Stan developed the Marvel universe is something that we were very conscious of when we were developing alliances, is that it should feel sci-fi, close to our world. And like Luke is saying about weapons, it's stuff that you would not expect to be weaponized. Like Tony Stark was a weapons maker. He made weapons, and then he felt bad about it. Those were always going to be weapons of war. What our thing is like, what are the things that we aren't thinking that when you create it, that you don't necessarily think would be a weapon? And in the case of the inventor in Orphans, he creates something that he doesn't realize is going to be a weapon, and it becomes weaponized. It creates a hive mind. This, you know, super artificial intelligence creates a hive mind. But it, you know, in his mind, it could be used for good. You know, just from the different perspective, it gives us great opportunity to introduce villains too. that have motivations that,
Yes.
to Stan, which I learned, from Stan, and especially in his conversations with Luke, because they had a lot of conversations about this, is how to create a great villain, which is, the antithesis of what the hero's powers are. So
Ryan, I'm going to say
that's alliances.
So that's a nice segue to go talk a little bit about alliances, orphans, and some of the characters, because you already mentioned there's a villain in you already mentioned that it creates a villain. Now in Alliance Orphans, and correct me if I'm wrong, is Eclon? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Equal.
Yeah. Right, because he's kind of sort of the villain of this story. Is that correct?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
He'll
eat you. Yeah.
So but I'm sorry, I'm kind of going a little bit off the cuff here because I want to ask you about if you guys could give descriptions of the characters, but the thing I loved about one of the chapters focused on his background story. Right. That's what I love. And the thing is too that Luke, when you start to talk about is it nature versus nurturing, and we get a very good backstory of him. It's incredible because for some reason I connected with him, and I was like, oh my God,
Yeah, I mean, he did not get enough love as a child, that's for sure.
Yeah.
We can kind of talk about what this is. I mean, when Equal comes from a race, the Vaptors, who are they were the foot soldiers under the previous sort of the slave masters, the hive that we were talking about before. And now that the hive is gone, they're trying to take over. Like they're trying to step into that power vacuum.
Yes.
And Equal is one of the sort of premier generals among them. Yes. But when they're growing up, they believe in a sort of survival of the fittest kind of Darwinism to the nth degree. And so they drop, when you hit adolescence, they drop 9 of them into a pit, and 3 of them that emerge, because they're just sent in there to kill each other, and the 3 that emerge get to live into adulthood. And so because they're trying to constantly sort of purify their bloodlines, and that's how they go about it. And so, yeah, Equal is definitely a product of that, but he also embraces it. I mean, he's a true believer in that. He when I said he'll eat you, like he would consider eating you the way you would think of eating a chicken or something. Like you're a lower life form, and so he is the apex predator, and therefore he gets to eat you alive. That's the way that's his position, and he's sticking to it.
But one of the fun things of like being able to work in comic books is that you get to like blend genre in a really fun way. And I think with Equal, and I'm so happy you enjoyed, getting to know him a little bit more, because it is a bold choice, I think, for us to have done a pretty, substantial sized graphic novel, and the major backstory that's revealed and we spend time with is our villain. But I think, part of that is the perception of the world is important to understand, and and we wanted to have a perception change. And like if you're perceiving that Equal is just this sort of villainous, I'm going to go eat you, reptilian type character, and I'm just going to keep showing up, and I'm going to stop at nothing, I'm a predator, I'm going to kill you. And then if you stop for a second and think about that person and expand their story, that makes them less one-dimensional. And then you may have thought they were a little bit less dimensional than they are. And then we give you the opportunity to kind of reflect on that. And that's like kind of by design, but I'm glad that you enjoyed that, because we enjoy Equal very much. Yes. I don't want him to eat me. I'm scared. I don't know.
I also want to talk about the other characters in the book, the Orphans. And now, the Orphans are made up of Little Boy, Hayes, Rascal, Critter, and Samsey. Is that correct? I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. So if you guys don't mind going over, some of the characters on those. And I love William Anderson's Ackerson's backstory. Yeah.
Well, William is the human, so he's the only one that's not an orphan, really. But but he's someone that comes out of the earlier literature. Now, look, we always wanted to make it so that you did not need to read the earlier material in order to jump in.
Yes.
Particularly as this is the first in the comic book medium, so we wanted this to be a fresh jumping on point for people. But for those, and actually at the end of this book, we do have a prose chapter showing how William kind of got his powers, which is from the second in the series, New Reality, the one that Will Wheaton read for us,
Right.
Audible. And but William is he's kind of a classic standpoint in that he's sort of cursed with his power. He's the reason he's a man lost in space is because at the end of New Reality, he launched himself off of Earth in order to try to rid himself of this power because he was too dangerous to the people around him that he loved. And he's trying to figure out how to sort of cure himself. Of course, in the end, he becomes central to saving the galaxy, as it were.
Yes.
Now, the Orphans, little boy is kind of near and dear to my heart because he's just a giant little boy. I mean, he's 10 feet tall, but he's sort of 5 years old. And he's got all this potential. He's a genius, and he's obviously kind of, strong and whatnot, and doesn't know his own strength. But he, as much as he wants to lead and invent, and he's still emotionally sort of learning how to regulate his emotions. He's still immature. Still got that little boy immaturity, and that also kind of makes him a fun character. Ryan, do you want to take the rest of them?
What I think we love about the Orphans as a concept is that, they should feel like they kind of like came out of a sci-fi serial from the 50s in a way, and like a European style graphic novel, like Mobius thing. And they all interact with each other. Hopefully that comes across for readers. It's like, we've got Samsi, who's sort of this like lone, sort of samurai, kind of falls in that kind of tradition of Luke, refers to Strider and Lord of the Rings, with her. And she's somebody who's, seen battle, but holds on to her kind of the battle scars in a way as a point of reflection. So she's incredibly soulful in that sense. And then, Rascals, the adventurer, kind of, she's got, the throwback look. And, I love that about her. And, she also, similarly, you would expect as the pilot in a cosmic story to love technology, but she's, throws it to the side in sort of like an Indiana Jones kind of way. And then, Hayes and Critter are like, the fun and game duo for us, and I always love, and Luke and I would talk about all the great duos in like comic book, dumb and history. And, one of the things that's wonderful about working with people like Bill and Sleeman and, Dynamite is that, and Luke, is that like everybody here like appreciates where comic books have come from. So you can kind of like bend rules or like fall into the rules. So like, Critter and Hayes fall into that kind of buddy, my favorite kind of monster pet, but like also sort of like, but Critter has a personality, so he's given a little bit of agency here. So and one of the things with the Orphans in the way that the book is structured is that Bill Sienkiewicz did the first prologue that we wrote with Stan, which is, like Luke mentioned, the sort of foundations of alliances as a whole. And then we jump time when Sleeman picks it up. So we picked up on the Orphans' journey after many years of adventures. So they should feel like they've been developed bonds that are, kind of on the outskirts of the frame. So, but we should also, because I don't remember, we talked about this maybe before we were recording, but we should also sort of mention what it is that brings them all sort of together, which is, the reason that they're orphans is because those slave masters, the Hive, when they would wipe out a planet, they would keep one member of the species that they thought remarkable for whatever reason alive. And so each of these orphans is the last of their kind. And all of their kin has been wiped out. And they are sort of collected by this biologist of the Hive named Zoll, who's sort of experimenting on them and wants to learn about their adaptations in biology. That's why they've kept them alive as these sort of, specimens. But they were, kept together, and they became a found family. What they all have in common is that they've all lost everything. And that all that they have is each other.
Yes. I no now, yes, I can't say anymore because I don't want to spoil anything, but I Luke, I hear you. I understand. Yes. Um, let's see. This is a fun question I want to ask. Is Critter based on anyone's pet?
No. I wish I
I
had like critter. I have cats, so no.
I don't know. I mean, I mentioned I mentioned this, and I was, some of the um character creation when
Mhm,
Sleemon came on was done during the early parts of the pandemic, and I was in New York City,
mhm.
so I mean, I don't know. There were things that looked like Critter, but nothing.
Yeah, and
Critter,
Chrono.
Critter might be a little cuter than what came out of the sewers when the people all left.
I ha because I'm gonna say because listeners, if you guys pick up this book, and I love Bill Sienkiewicz's art, and when I saw Critter, I was like, oh, it was like no, it was like it just looked a little ferocious, it looked mean, and when um I'm gonna try to pronounce the artist name Seasmon, if I'm pronouncing his name.
Sleeman.
When he came on, when he drew Critter just looked like this lovable pet. But but when he needs to fight and attack, he can do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I have experience with that as the dog owner of the group, where I've seen my Aussie Australian Shepherd go from like hero to villain in like a split second. So it can happen.
Okay. Let's see. Sorry, I thought I had the question written down somewhere. I can't find it, but um, because you guys worked with Stan, on alliances. I'm just gonna ask, did Stan had like notes and everything for you guys? When did he have notes and like a notebook and this is what
We
this
kept we kept the notes, but yeah. We like this started out after I finished working for Stan. I just stayed tight with him, so I would make a
yes.
point of going over there every once in a while. I would call his assistant and find out when he had a window in his schedule, and he could, I could kind of knock on his door and hang out. And we got to talking, and we kind of came up with, we got to talking, some of it was about the internet, but then we got to talking about the inventor and the sort of concept at the heart of the prologue here.
Mhm,
And I realized kind of walking out the door that we had just come up with something that Stan was willing to work on with me.
mhm,
And so that when I saw that door crack open, I just leaned on it.
mhm,
And so then I came back to Stan with a more developed version of what we had just discussed. And then he gave me his thoughts on it. And we sort of, in those conversations, we started expanding. And then in between the conversations, I would go back, back to the lab again and try to further develop what we had discussed. Because I understood how precious his time was, and I wanted to make sure we were getting the most out of it.
mhm,
And then eventually the story got kind of big enough that I knew that basically I needed to be able to workshop, like I needed to be able to have the conversations with Stan and then workshop the development.
mhm,
And so that when we were coming back to him, because what Stan would do is he would sort of, that's when Ryan got involved, and then Ryan and I would come in, or we would get on the phone or whatever, and we would sort of, here's where we left things the last time we talked to you, Stan. Here's what we're thinking, and he
mhm,
would get rid of half of it and keep the parts he liked, and then he would create like a new character in the course of the conversation, and
mhm.
tell us to kind of figure out some backstory for it. I mean, he would kind of give you direction, tell you what he wanted you to do, give you his ideas, give you his feedback, and then you would incorporate them and workshop it, and then bring, have another conversation with them a month later or whatever it was. I mean, that was kind of the process.
That is amazing. That is really amazing. Um, Ryan, I'm gonna ask you this question now, and you guys and Luke, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Now, this year, um, actually it's going to be December 28th of this year, Mark Stanley's 100th birthday. Now, Ryan, I'm going to ask with you, and Luke, you can jump in or whoever. Did you guys plan to release this third volume um on this year, marking his 100th birthday? Did you guys plan it that way?
No.
Oh,
No.
okay.
I mean, it's just one of those things that just lined up. But no,
No,
no.
we came out with it because we finished it after we did the last one. Like we did the
Yeah.
last one, and then we did
Oh,
this one. We're just kind of, when things are, we're doing each part of the series, and then when the next thing is ready to be released, it gets released. We're not really, I think somebody brought that up too. I think somebody brought that up, like kind of mentioned that to us earlier this year. Oh, okay.
no, yeah.
It wasn't a conscious thing.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. And then, Luke, I'm going to ask you this question, and I think I kind of know where your answer is going to be. So, like, or actually, let me rephrase this question. It has to do with Dynamite. Because Luke, I know you wrote Red Sonja stories for Dynamite. So how did you guys go to Dynamite with the story already presented, or how did that
Well,
work
so
out?
understand as a licensor of the character, it's not just the ones I write. I mean, I oversee everything that's done in the publishing sphere with the character and outside the publishing sphere with the
Okay.
character. So, I deal with Dynamite all the time. We put out multiple books a month
Yes.
that we are in dialogue on. So, Nick, the publisher there, is a close friend of mine, has been for a long time. So
Mhm.
they were kind of, once the team, the sort of alliances team, had decided it was time to do something in comics,
Mhm.
there was not really a question that we were going to do with Dynamite, because
Okay.
they're my partner.
Yeah.
But I will say that, having worked with Dynamite a long time, what that allowed us to do is just kind of focus on the quality of this book,
Yes.
because the workflow is easy. Like I
Mhm.
know those guys. There was no learning process or communication hurdles or anything. I mean, we
Mhm.
could just make the best product we could make, and Dynamite really stepped it up. I mean, they really sort of demanded a lot of themselves, demanded a lot of us, and I think they did a great job.
Ryan, I'm going to ask you. We've already talked about the incredible artists that you guys got for this book. Ryan, do you want to give shout out to the rest of the creative team that helped bring this that made this book?
Yeah, like Luke mentioned, I mean, we've been really fortunate. Luke for many years studied under like the best, one of a legendary comic creator, but also one of the best comic editors of all
Mhm.
time, which is Stan.
Yes.
And something that we've been so fortunate with is having editorial teams on all of our projects that are just like top notch, and
Mhm.
like nothing beats the collaborative process with an editor, and it's not really talked about enough in the comic business about how
Mhm.
important that is. So Joe Ryban over at Dynamite was just an extraordinary partner in this,
Mhm.
in putting together what is, like I've said before, like we go out there with some of the choices we make in this book. We make some bold choices by
Mhm.
design, and he was always supportive of that, and helped us kind of manage what could be something that's really hard to kind of pull together.
He
And then
also managed us.
us, yeah, we're not so
Required
easy. And then
management.
yeah, and Jorge, who pulled the colors together, this
Yes.
was like, I mean, the dream was like the North Star for this, as mentioned, was like Silver Surfer Parable, like from a look standpoint, like from that image, like that old school European graphic novel vibe, right? And when the colors came in, he really understood that in a way where his art with Slimane is like, just it brings such I hope some sort of elegance to the project, that the readers can experience. And then who never gets the love is like lettering,
Yes.
but it's but this, I think this book reads really smoothly for that. But the whole Dynamite team, really, like, I mean, I could be listing names for the rest of my
Okay.
like time on this podcast
Mhm.
probably, but like the book design, everything that goes into it, they're like just artisans at every single step of the way that just like leaned in on this. So we're really thankful.
Let's see. I am going to ask Luke, I'm going to start off with you. How cool was it? Can you describe when you kept seeing art pages coming in? What was your feeling?
We were kind of hungry for them, I mean, like, I don't know how else to put it. And Sleeman was he was like a machine. He made, I mean, we would go back and forth with him a bit, but he understood. He kind of understood. He picked up what we were putting down.
Yes.
And with Bill was a bit of a kind of a longer process for each bit. Each piece is this work of art, and it was a little bit different in the sense that Sleeman's work is a bit more grounded, and
yes.
And Bill's work is a little bit more, I don't want to say abstract, but it's a little bit more, he's got a wild imagination.
Yeah. Yes.
So it was a bit of a different process. But I mean, look, you've got it in your head, you've got sort of what you imagine, and then you have to let go. You have to let the artist be an artist and, see it the way that they see it. And what you're going to get back is not exactly what you had pictured in your head. A lot of times it's better because you're dealing with someone who has their own creative vision and knows how to visualize things. And so what you want and what we got is someone who's going to elevate your writing, someone who's going to make it better than what it was when you first put it on the page, someone who's going to add, it's like you're in a band and, you could be the vocalist, but you need a good guitarist that's going to come in and, put down some notes that you hadn't thought of.
Ryan, what about you? Like when
Well, I mean, it's so cool to see art come in. I mean, Luke had to teach me how to read it because, I was like, wow, what does it look like at this stage normally? But it was really fun experience. And, like I said, Bill's a hero of both Luke and mine forever. And Sleeman's somebody newer to my kind of, register, but just the two of them being able to talk comics and just the most fun part about making comics is like that's kind of the one of the things about your podcast that I love is like just like getting to talk about the things you love with other people, and talking about Heinlein with Luke and then sharing the ideas about talking about Dune with Bill, or like sharing pages from some of our favorite comic books with Sleeman, to be like, we're trying to achieve something like this. Like that's just like a fun way to communicate and like create, talking about the stuff you love. So, and then generating something new from that.
All right, guys, I'm going to slowly start wrapping things up. Now I know you guys, if you guys can't say anything else, but that's fine, I understand. But is there another Alliance story that's going to be coming out in a hardcover or another audiobook? Are you guys working on one right now?
Well, Ryan's gonna reach through the screen and tase me if I announce anything outside of when I'm allowed to talk about it. But
that's not my superpower, that. That's somebody else's. It's your other part.
I'm gonna
here, Luke. He will just come through the internet and just gas you.
Right. But I mean, look, we've got just a wealth of sort of world building that that we created over the years with Stan, and we are, we're getting through, and we're sort of realizing that narrative. I mean, it's a little bit, we only want to work with top quality partners, and we only want to put out top quality products, and we're not just churning it out.
Yes.
So we appreciate the fans' patience with us, because I guess we've put out 3 projects in 4 years. Does that sound right, Ryan?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I mean, not since we started releasing projects. Yes. Yeah. So a lot more material to go through.
Yeah, but we're going to be back in the lab again, as I said earlier. And we know the next stories we're telling. We know where we're going, and just so that I don't upset our partners, I will not announce it ahead of time.
No,
but like, I'm just curious, like, because Jason, we're like, because for us, it's like this is feedback time. So it's like, I'm just curious, like, what was your like, what was your experience with the book, and like, where would maybe you want to see things expand? Because this is fun for me to find out.
Well, I'm just going to say is basically, and I told you guys before we started the podcast, and like I said, I'm sorry, I'm not very good with certain words, but I just love the richness of the graphic novel. It's, the world building. The orphans, it's like the orphans, bonded as a group. I just love them. I love Little Boy. I love Critter. There's a funny scene, and I spoke to Luke about, we can't talk about because I want people to have it come across on their own, but there was that one scene where I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Luke, it was Little Boy and Hayes. They're in they're in front of a computer monitor, and that's all I'm going to say.
They're having a conversation about a certain something.
Yeah, those are fun, but and I don't know. The thing I love about this too is, I love the world building, and it's a very good sci-fi story, and it's a story I'm going to say I want to read again, because there's so much layers to it. I really want to read it again. Again, for me, it's not a, oh yeah, hey, this is and Ryan, like you said, it's in the style of like a European story, where it's a very good story. It's, there's a lot of meat to this. That's what it is, and I love it. And I want to see. And the other thing is, I can't say more because I read the ending. I just want to see where they go next. Actually, I want to see if they're going to come to a certain place. But I think that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Thank
you. I mean,
sorry, what were you going to say, Ryan?
No, go ahead.
No, but it's a very good science fiction story. It is. I know it's action adventure, but yeah. Seasman, because now correct me, the orphan ship is called the Orphanage. Is that correct? Did I get that correct?
Yeah.
I love the design of the ship, because I've never, and as a longtime comic book reader fan, science fiction fan, we've seen everything visual. I've never seen a ship like that, and it's a nice design. It really is, so yeah.
Thank you. That means a lot. And that ship design, I'm sure Simon will appreciate that, because that was a big volley for Joe, our editor, and to interpret our kind of creative needs and interests, and Sleeman, what he was doing. And, that was a big, fun experiment. But I'm happy it's exciting to hear that, you're happy with the result. And we are going to expand into the orphan story, forward. And then, like I said, I can say enough that there are, like I've indicated, that there's a time jump that, leaves a lot of story to be told. And that's something that Luke and I love in science. Our favorite science fiction is that not everything needs to be told in a linear fashion. And, we want to make sure that fans get an enriching experience with every new project we do. So they don't feel like they have to have read everything, but that they get better, some additional kind of flavor and love when they do. So we're out there listening.
Okay. And then, sorry, let me just add this one other thing. And Luke, like you said, I didn't need to listen to the previous audiobooks, because when I read the books, when I read Orphans, I wasn't lost. I knew, it's like, I know that these characters have been together, they bonded together because they're the last of their kind. And that's all I can say. It's like I didn't have to go, okay, wait, who's Little Boy again? Or do I need to read his? It's just, this group is here, they're facing a situation, and it's just, they're just moving forward, so so, but yeah, like I said, they bonded very well, so
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, really, thank you. It's I think our generation too, it's one of those things where, like, Luke's had a character that's existed for, working on a character that he's been working on for decades, and existed for decades prior. And I think we're all sensitive because we came out of this generation also where we had comic book stores, right? But we didn't have full access to like the entire back catalog of
Yes.
everything everywhere. And you always had to have, you wanted to feel like these characters and stories were lived in, but you never
Yes.
felt like you wanted to have to buy everything, even
Yes.
though, you know, 9 times out of 10 you did. But, things went out of print. Like, I'm curious to know where comic books go from here. I'm just, maybe you can ask people when they come on the show, because with like digital creation now, or digital libraries now, people have access to like unlimited information about their stories. Like, you could go really like create like a really, really dense rogue story now, probably.
All right, sorry guys, I'm going to start wrapping things up because I just want to ask maybe 3 or 4 more questions. Luke, I'm going to start off with you. You guys have spent a lot of time with Stan. What was your favorite moment with him? And then Ryan, you can answer it afterwards. Yeah.
Well, my favorite moment with him wasn't a professional moment. So I guess what I would say is my favorite, my favorite professional moments with him were probably it was probably when I went to the Spider-Man premiere with him, and it just kind of getting to see Stan. And this means a lot. I'm finally making the Red Sonja movie after trying to get it made for, it's been a like 15, 16-year process trying to get the Sonja movie made. So when I was sitting there watching him finally see the Spider-Man movie happen, and seeing kind of what that meant to him because of how long that process took and how long it took, for him to get to that point. And it's one of those things that, it was a bit of a life lesson too, because it showed you how perseverance sort of paid off. Like you just, you don't give up. You just kind of keep putting that boulder up that hill.
Ryan, what about you?
For me, it was like almost like a moment that I feel like I have battle scars. And I think anybody who's worked with Stan has had this experience where he like tears apart your work and like, or something you're bringing to him. And like, you're like in shock and awe and you never really quite get over it. It's like PTSD. But I live with a tremendous amount of respect out of that experience. Didn't feel great at the time, but he basically took, redid a lot of the work we'd put into A Trick of Light. And we talk about this in A Trick of Light, in the afterward in Trick of Light. But he reconceived of like full characters, in a 10-minute session, probably. and that we've been working on together, all of us, for many years. And he was willing to take that kind of risk, and like Luke was saying about perseverance, he was never challenged with like, this needs to be rushed, like it's better to get it right. And he wasn't super precious about the work, but he took a tremendous amount of pride in the work. And that to me is something that I take with me to everything I do now.
Yeah, well, also I think what Ryan means when he says he wasn't precious is that for Stan, they're always like, as a younger creator, you can always get kind of tied to some idea that you have. And Stan's attitude was, there's more where those came from. And so if it wasn't working for whatever reason, he would just toss it. Like he didn't think
exactly.
And it felt a little, you felt like you were getting shredded because, you just put all this heart and soul into creating something that Stan considered for all of 5 seconds before he threw it out the door and, had a better idea. But that's it's a Socratic method. The goal is ultimately to get to the best result.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
3 more questions. And then, what is the most fun or exciting thing? Actually, I'm going to start off with you, Ryan. What is the most fun or exciting thing you love working in comics?
I think I talked about it before. I think it's like the amount of creativity that goes into the creation of the book, all the way to like designing the actual book cover, and like there's like a foil stamp on our book that I would never have even thought like that was like an idea we could even do. And our graphic designer, Kathy, came up with this idea and she fought for it, and she was like, this is gonna look great, let's do this. And it's like, that's amazing. Like I never would have thought, when we're at that stage, that we'd still be dealing with like incredibly creative people who care so much. So it's, for me, it's meeting those kinds of people along the way.
Luke, what about you?
I think my favorite part of working in comics is that there's just no boundaries to it. So like, I'm on a film production right now, and there are, there's a budget and there's constraints, and there's what's physically possible and what isn't. And, with comics, Orphans just has the largest possible scale. They're all fighting around a black hole, and, they're building inventions around quasars, and, you don't have to think twice about like any sort of limitation.
Yeah.
Just kind of, wherever your creative mind goes, you can make that happen. I think that's my favorite part of this medium.
Yeah.
All right, 2 more questions. Luke, I'm going to start off with you. Have you and your family been to Hawaii?
I have, yeah. I've been there. I did my honeymoon there. In fact, it's a little weird to watch. We like that show White Lotus, which I think was shot at the Maui, the Four Seasons Maui, which is where I had my honeymoon. So it's a little weird for us to watch that show because we were those people, I guess. And I mean, we had a better experience, but and then I went a couple of years ago. I took my kids and my mother-in-law and my wife, and we did the Big Island. We go back. I mean, I live in LA, so Hawaii is actually kind of a practical place for us to get to. So we, every couple of years we go.
Oh, okay, all right. Ryan, what about you?
I'm less travel than either of you. I travel in my imagination. No, I've never been.
Okay. Well, one day, sometime in the future, you got to come out. And I'm going to mention to you guys, yes, we do have comic book conventions out here. So, yeah. Hopefully an organizer is listening and goes, hey.
I need to find these guys out and put them up in a hotel.
Well, that would be great. I would love to. I would love to go to a comic convention in Hawaii, and I think that would be the best. I mean, that's great. Yeah, I could check that off. I could check that off my list of the states that I've been to comic book conventions at, which would be really nice.
Okay. Ryan, I'm going to start off with you. Any closing words to our listeners?
Well, I mean, for me, buy our book, please. I mean, it sounds like I can't believe I even have to say that, but you dream about the day when you can say it. So I'm just gonna say it and be a complete shill. I mean, for me, as somebody who is a fan and turns like a creator, I would just say dream. It's all possible. Just keep at it. Like Luke said, it's the perseverance is rewarded. If you love something, and you want to work in something, keep at it. And but first buy alliances so you can, be inspired.
There you go.
All right, Luke, what about you?
I mean, what I'm going to echo my shill of a partner. No, I guess what I would say is, look, we really put a lot of heart and soul into this thing, and I think it came out well, and I'm proud of it. I think Stan would be proud of it. So obviously, we would love people to read it and let us know what you think. I mean, we definitely want to hear from you. It's one of our favorite parts of this process. And I mean, that's it. That's kind of what it's all about.
So, mahalo. Thank you in Hawaiian. Luke and Ryan, just thank you very much for your time. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview the both of you. And I wish you guys all the success with Alliance, the Alliance's Orphans graphic novel that's out now in stores, and also with the Alliance Universe property. I wish you guys all the success.
Thank you.
Again, I want to give a big shout out to Mia Jacobs and Liz Bieber of the Lead Company for setting up this interview and for providing me with an advanced review copy. So Mia and Liz, thank you very much. Now, if you are a new comic book reader or a lifelong comic book reader, please check out Stanley's Alliance Orphans. As I mentioned, to me, this is a very rich sci-fi story. And, and as Ryan has mentioned, it's, to me, this also, it feels like it's along the lines of a European comic book where it's a very rich story that has a lot of meaning and it's beautifully drawn. It really is. Also too, And for listeners, if you're trying to figure out, not only pick up a copy for yourself, but I would just also say, consider, giving this. Christmas is a couple months away. Either give this as a Christmas gift to a friend or a birthday gift to your friends too as well. So I also want to thank Drew, the co-host of Comics for Fun and Profit, for putting this episode together. Drew, thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes. And if you are a new listener, please check out new episodes of Comics for Fun and Profit that comes out every Saturday. And I want to thank you, the listeners. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys, aloha.